Yeah, I'm James. I come from Chicago. I've been in Hong Kong since September 2000. And before that, I was working in Chicago as a freelance and went to University of Boston U and then Northwestern. I had to decide basically whether I wanted to pursue orchestral percussion or marimba playing or composition or conducting. And so in my early 20s, I was trying to find my way with that. And during that time, I was highly into contemporary percussion. So I was gigging as much as I could in Chicago. And I had a real love for timpani playing after I graduated from Boston and moved back to Chicago. Joined the Civic Orchestra and played with them for 5 seasons as timpanist. And then after that, was starting to get called to sub with Chicago Symphony and did that quite regularly before coming to Hong Kong. So during all those years, I was taking auditions, not having the greatest success, but sticking with it. And Hong Kong was number 13. And it turned out that that's the happiest choice of my life, moving here and taking that job in the orchestra. That's kind of who I am and where I came from. Yeah. Yep, sure. Well, for all of us, what an incredible year it's been, unlike any other. And I think it was in January we played our last concert with the Philharmonic. And yep, the last week of January. Then we shut down for an intermittent amount of time, and nobody knew what was happening, and everybody was a little bit scared, and it was kind of a weird time for everybody in the arts field. But here in Hong Kong, at least, we never had society completely shut down. So although we couldn't go to work, I was able to express to the cultural center about how I needed to practice, or else it would have been 6 months without me touching an instrument. So they did eventually allow me, and during the early months of the pandemic, I was just going in to play every day for a 2-hour chunk. Decided to work on things I hadn't had time to work on, so I revisited learning all 8 of the Carter pieces, practiced my own music. But then, I felt like I wanted to do something more in this time, and that's when I had the decision to really focus on the composition. And so I had an idea that since we couldn't, the Hong Kong Philharmonic, play on the Cultural Center stage, what if I wrote a piece for 10 of us? Because that was the maximum amount of people that could, get together at that point, was 10. So I made it for 10 musicians and designed it in a way we could play it somewhere, anywhere in the city. And I had this also idea that I wanted architecture and music to come together. So if we could play this piece extremely spread out, socially distanced, and that it also told the story of what it feels like being socially distanced. This is how I approached the piece at first. So also at that time, Spain and Italy were having terrible pandemic problems, and there were these videos coming out of opera singers singing off their balconies, and that really touched me. And so in building the form of this piece, I thought, I'll have 4 soloists who are in disparate locations, and they're facing into like a central square in Europe, and they're singing their songs out of their windows. And that's how I developed the form. And within that, then I wanted each one of those characters to express a different part of grief of this. It's a dark piece, and this is not a hopeful thing that was happening at the time. So yeah, one person singing about not being able to see their family, they're separated, the other person is sick, the other person, it's kind of like this idea. And then at the end of the piece, they all start singing together, but they've changed their exchanged their voices, in other words. Anyway, so I thought a great place to play this would be in a staircase, all spread out. And so I approached Taekwon, and they were very happy to do it. And so we decided to make this video in the staircase, and this is how it turned out. And the crew that was hired was fantastic, and they just did a great job, and they really captured what I was trying to say, that you might notice there's never a scene where 2 musicians are playing together. We're all separated. The piece is designed to be played. You don't need a conductor. You can be spread out. You have to, it's a tricky thing, but this is where I approached that from, and I was really happy to have the opportunity to play it with my colleagues, finest musicians in town, with a great crew, and it was really a moving experience for me. Yeah, it's interesting. Well, first of all, in my age, when we were in school studying about this was music for live instruments and tape. And now it's, I couldn't find the right word, so I choose MP3, which again, in 20, 30 years, people will be like, what's an MP3? So that's kind of cool. And also with the word drone, I mean, when I was good, a drone was a low sound or a high sound that repeats, and now a drone's something that flies in the air. So they have different meanings, but I'm using it in the sense that it's a repeated sound. And for me, I find it fascinating to have a live instrument playing on top of a drone, because what a person acoustically hears is they hear, of course, the pitch of the drone. But as time goes on, their mind wanders and you forget that it's there. And it's kind of an interesting thing for me to play around with that idea. This pitch is always there, it's always been there, but people don't always hear it. And of course I use it in social distancing too, because this drone was like the repetitiveness of us being isolated and commonality in the world. So for me, I'm drawn to that idea of building music on top of a stagnant pitch. But the way I use it now more is that stagnant pitch, I change the rhythm of the pitch, or I change the color of the pitch, but it's always there. And I like the idea of something that travels with us always, that's there, but where you don't necessarily see it all the time. So that's why I'm writing in that way. Right. Yeah. Well, my composition teacher at Boston U was a really interesting man, and he didn't believe in teaching his students how to write music. He believed in teaching them how to think about writing music. And for him, what was really important was that each instrument is a character, and each instrument has its own idiomatic capabilities. And a successful composer draws those possibilities out of the instrument. So I've tried to approach writing for instruments always thinking like I'm playing that instrument, because also, as a performer, we get pieces that we have to play, and sometimes you'll spend weeks and weeks on a really difficult lick that has no satisfaction after you've practiced it, and that's kind of what I try to avoid. I want to write a piece that's technically hard, but that, like whether it's for bass clarinet or flute, that it falls kind of naturally into their instrument. And I really appreciate that as a performer when I play a piece, and I sense that from the composer. So that's how I've approached it. And the other project of the pandemic was this piece zone, where I took the same piece and I rewrote it 18 or 20 times for a different instrument each. And in that process, that was great. Further, study for me about the capability of each instrument. So in writing for orchestra or any combination, I'm always thinking about the performer. And I want to make sure, and maybe they don't understand the music, but that they feel that it's at least well written for them. Yeah, I have to be, honestly, it was not getting performed as I was growing up. And I always had my MIDI, and that would play my music for me. And that's how I've heard, as I was younger, that's how I was hearing my music, always played by an electronic instrument. And as I've grown older and more experienced, I've kept that, and I actually love the sound of MIDI instruments. And I think it's super cool to play your live instrument with the MIDI instrument, because the MIDI instrument, again, is like an extended metronome. Or I actually had a student once who I think was being somewhat derogatory in calling that kind of music karaoke style, where you're playing along with something. But to me, that's actually quite a compliment, because people who do carry, it's fun. It's fun playing with something that you can trust, that is the same every time, and you layer your artistry on top of it. So that's why I've kept almost every piece I write now is synthetic instruments and live together. Well, being a principal timpanist is a great thing for me, because, of course, we play an extremely important role in the orchestra. But at the same time, we're usually in the back, and there's usually quite a lot of rests. And so I've had the pleasure of observing an orchestra for my entire life from such an interesting seat, not from the audience, from being inside of this organism that's alive. And that's taught me so much, just watching, listening, appreciating what works and what doesn't, and having those goals in myself. You know, when you play Mahler 9, there's knowing as a composer, I'm never probably going to achieve that level, but I've been able to take part in that, and that's quite an honor for me.
So would you say Timpani is your favorite instrument?
To play or to listen to or to write for?
Or anything.
Yeah, playing the timpani is great fun. If I could do it all over, I'd play the viola. Listening and writing for the timpani, also great fun. Writing for percussion, fantastic. Playing percussion, fantastic. Listening to it, fantastic. But I think I would rather have played a more intimate instrument, like the lute or viola or something that I could just always carry around with me and just, I would always have it. But writing and listening, yeah, I love percussion. We're the most versatile of all the instruments, the most versatile colored or dynamics, or we can play softer than anybody, louder than anybody. Can play one triangle with 5 different states, have completely different sound. So as an artistry of sound color and stuff, percussion is fantastic. I think it was around 8. Yep, it was a troubled time in my family. My parents were getting divorced. I was looking for something probably to do, like to keep me busy. And I stumbled across a drum set and just thought that'd be kind of cool to play. And, begged my father to get me a set. And he eventually did. And so I was tinkering around playing rock music, liking it. And I think it was my first kind of serious drum teacher, was a coach for a youth Philharmonic. And somebody was sick one weekend and he called me and said, "You want to go and sub for this guy?" And I was like, all right. And so I took the train to the city in Chicago, went to this rehearsal. Yeah, I still remember. It was Peter and the Wolf, Pines of Rome. And I was like, wow, this is just awesome. I love it. And so that's how I got into the orchestral part of it. But yeah, just finding my way into music was probably through rock band. And just as a lot of kids, they're searching for something to, express themselves, keep them busy, distract them. That's how it came about. Well, so many reasons, really. My eldest brother was living here at the time. Completely different profession. He came here. So, like I said too, I've been taking auditions and making it a couple times into the final, but never not winning, of course. And then Hong Kong came up, and so I thought, I'll try this. And I knew my brother was living. He didn't love it here, but I knew I'd have somebody, and I thought it'd be great to live in a different culture. So I took the audition, and like an hour-long audition, and waited a couple months to hear, and then they said, "Yeah, you have it." And so I thought, yeah, I'll go. And I thought, like a lot of people who come here, maybe they'll stay a year or two. And I met my wife in the orchestra the first year. Loved the city, loved the whole atmosphere, the safety, the excitement, the just kind of coolness of living in Hong Kong. Yeah, and the orchestra. I fell in love with our orchestra, and it was great fun playing with my colleagues, and just it turned out that it was a lifelong choice. And, for any kid who's in music school now, you never know where you're going to end up. So you have to have an open mind. You have to try. You have to go where you're meant to be placed, and see how it works. So for me, it worked great. Yeah. Yeah, I think sometimes couples would find it weird working together because you're at work, you're at home, you're at work, you're at home. But for us as classical musicians, as our concerts are Fridays, Saturday nights, so if we weren't together, I would never see her on weekend evenings and stuff. So I've loved it. I think she likes it too. I mean, we go to work, we share that part of our life, which is huge. It's a huge thing being an orchestral musician. It's like, it's hard for people who don't play in an orchestra to understand, but it's a big part of our lives. And we experience so much stuff in a rehearsal or a concert we can always share that together, which is good. So for us, it's been healthy. Yeah, and like next year, I've written her a piccolo concerto that Jaap's gonna play with us. So that kind of working together is also super cool. I know I'm married to like one of the best musicians around, and I can write anything for her, and she can play it. And so this is going to be a real special thing for us to share together. Yeah. Well, this year too, in the pandemic, the kids were home from school, so we were home from work. Our kids were home. It's like we had this gift of a year of family being home together, which is probably never going to happen again in life. So we spent a lot of time just like that. And I was doing my writing and my other stuff, but we were spending a lot of time as a family, doing a lot of hiking, doing a lot of watching the shows together, whatever. And it's been really, really nice. I guess it's on Lantau. There's a little part of the Lantau Trail. If you're walking towards Tayo, that for me is just one of the most beautiful secluded spots in town. So if I could just like go and spend an afternoon somewhere, it'd be up there on the trail where you can see 360 degrees of just, magnificent islands, greenery. It's really quite special for me. So in nature, it's probably that. And in the actual city, I love the promenade by the cultural center. I love just walking around streets in Mongkok also, just, stuff like that. That's probably it. Yeah, that's a great question, because I wish I knew how to advise better, because I'm finding now, just my students at the academy or whatever, it's unlike any other normal graduation where I try to prepare them and get them shipped off to another school in America or England or somewhere so they can further their studies. And now I'm not convinced that's the way to go. And furthermore, I'm not convinced the traditional route in classical music is there anymore either. So I would strongly encourage students to experiment with the new technology that's around. Making videos, your social media is as important as a conservatory these days. I'm convinced in that, and I really feel that the traditional route is unfortunately dead. At least for the time being. So students, whether they do something like you've done and they have their own place and they have their own vision, whether they find out how to get their music onto the blockchain, whether they figure out how to welcome technology into their art, this is probably going to be more successful. Building a following on social media is so important these days. It's like key, integral. So producing videos, photos, your publicity packet, your vision of the future, this is what's going to separate people from now on, I think.
All right. Thank you, James.
Yeah, thank you.